Welcome everybody to Drive to Win. I'm Justin Bell. I'm here, obviously in the beautiful Wynn Las Vegas in the studio, right in the heart of the casino. And the show is presented by Mobil1 for the love of driving. Well, that was an interesting weekend, wasn't it, in Singapore under the lights? Of course, one of the things that really resonated with me about watching that race is it was the first ever night race when it opened there at Singapore a few years ago. First time we'd seen these amazing cars, paint schemes under the lights, which of course is what we get when we come back here to Las Vegas in just a few weeks' time. So it was like a premonition, seeing what the cars look like and what it's going to be, how the show is going to be when they make it to Las Vegas. Well, my guest this week is Alex Jacques, who is that F1 TV live lead commentator. I mean, I'm just such a fan of his. He is really turning out to be one of the most eloquent voices in the world of motorsport, and he has been on the show again last year. But he's back to tell us more about what it was like in Singapore, and I'm going to really dig into some fun storylines. The thing is, with that race, it reminded me of going to a concert when all the band members, the singer, everyone does a great job, but the end show wasn't that great. It wasn't one of the most memorable races in history, or certainly of the season, but the elements, the end result definitely was very formidable, especially for Lando Norris. His first pole to win, it was almost Max-esque in the way he pulled it off. It shows how tough it was out there. He was pushing, clipped the wall a couple of times during the race, which was literally put all of our hearts in our mouth. And at some points, he was even pulling a lap out. Quite remarkable for Lando. I think it was a turning point in his career. There's been moments that he's had the speed, he has the confidence. He's won everything on the way up to the junior formula. He really is leading the team. Obviously, a lot of pressure from Oscar Piastri. But this was the first race when I think on a Sunday night, he could go to bed and go, I absolutely dominated. There was nothing I could have done better that whole weekend, which will set him up, mark my words, for a run of even more dominant performances. He's been getting the poles, hasn't been converting them. He's now done it. So really fantastic. In second place, we had Max Verstappen, who I was thinking about it while I was watching the race. If there was a gauge that you could see on expenditure or an application of talent, dedication, taking risk, pushing the car to the absolute limits, digging deep, well, you'd have seen Max was on 100%. It's just his car is not as good as the McLaren right now. So I thought it was an exemplary race from him, and really in a result that only Max probably could have pulled off. Oscar Piastri in third, proving once again he is the new kid on the overtaking block. He just has something about him. I know we talked a bit with DC last week on the show. He has the ability to come up behind someone and execute a pass without any compassion, without any hesitation. And I was always given that advice when I was younger. When you get up behind someone, make the move before they've had a chance to work out how you're going to make the move. And boy, Oscar is definitely that guy. Well, we're going to get deeper into the race, but some takeaways for me is that driving that track in Singapore, even though it was late at night in those conditions, is unreal. And the conditioning of these drivers, some races, I don't think they're as physical for them. They certainly have, the demands in the car are not so great through the steering wheel as they used to be. The intensity is. But when it comes to racing in that heat, digging deep, I can only relate to it from maybe my most arduous race was in the Dodge Vipers in the 90s. And we were at Fuji. It was so hot. It was about 160 degrees inside the cockpit. Remember, a big V10 in front of us, a front engine car. When I was in the car and I went past the checkered flag, when the adrenaline dropped, I almost passed out because I lost that fire inside. I could barely complete the slowdown lap. I took off my gloves, and the worst thing I could do, I was trying to almost undress in the car, and the buckles were still scalding hot. And then when I jumped out, actually earlier in the race in one of the pit stops, I thought my foot was on fire. The boot had melted to the brake pedal as I applied the brakes before I jumped out. I had to reach back in and pull this sort of sticky shoe off the pedal. It is so intense. And I know a lot of people watching this, remember when you're at college or at school and you dig deep to a sport. In racing, there is no chance to take a breath when you're out there at those speeds. So the fatigue is hitting you. The heat is literally sapping your will. And you still have to stay accurate because the consequences, obviously, at that speed are dire if you hit the wall and terminal for the car. So, I mean, hats off to them. You saw, I mean, Franco Colapinto, he apologized to the team. I couldn't talk to you on the radio, guys. I literally was trying to conserve energy. And there was a really good compilation on one of the Formula One blogs of the drivers from their in-car cameras. They weren't getting out of the car. They just couldn't get themselves out at the end. They had to take a breather. So, you know, yes, they're highly paid young athletes, virile at the top of their game, but that was a race that really took it out of all of them. Mistakes by everybody. I mean, the first one of the Singapore Grand Prix that actually went without a yellow flag, which is unbelievable. Almost all their strategies were run bearing in mind there might be a high likelihood of a yellow flag. That didn't happen. That's why everybody was even more on the edge, especially at the end of the race. And Lando, he just was so dominant, so hard on it. And you might be thinking, well, why wasn't he backing off? Why wouldn't he just conserve a little, make it easier for himself? He had a 20-second lead or something. If you back off even just a little bit to go to a lap time to save yourself, especially if you're dominant, that's when your mind starts to wander. That's when you start to make mistakes. And on a racetrack like that, where one brush with the wall could be the end of the game, well, then it's maybe better to stay hard on the gas. And that's what Lando did. But he said that his two brushes with the wall were not about getting tired and not paying attention. It was literally the dirty AF and the cars in front and things like that. And he just went up against it. That one right-hander when he almost hit the wall, I was like, oh my God, his heart must be in his mouth. But at least he could do something about it. Imagine what it was like for Zach Brown and Andrea Stella in the pit box and all his mechanics. They must have just been like, you know, needing a diaper. Anyway, really a good thing to watch. Another big moment of the race was obviously all the speculation about Daniel Ricciardo. I mean, was it his last race? His body language, the words he used when he got out of the car in that wonderful interview that he had with Lawrence Barretto in the pen, you can tell he knows that the writing's not just on the wall. I think he's read the writing. He knows more than we do. Just that's my opinion. I'm sure by the time you're listening to this show, it probably has been announced that Liam Lawson will be in the seat. But it was definitely a poignant moment. He is one of the guys that took a few minutes to get out of the car. Imagine what that would be like. You've been a Grand Prix winner. At one point, you could have been a 2-time world champion if it wasn't for the dominance of Mercedes. I mean, you were faster than Max in your first 2 seasons at Red Bull. You beat Sebastian Vettel in your first season at Red Bull. You really were one of the best drivers, and the fact that your career has ended in the RB, you've put on some good performances, but just imagine what that's like for him. The last time you think you might be getting out of a Formula One car as your job, the last time you take your hands off that wheel and get out of the cockpit, I think that's pretty emotional. So only a few days, a few hours will probably tell what the actual results are of that, but it was pretty a special moment. Sir Lewis Hamilton, race number 350. Just put that in context. He's won 7 world championships, 105 wins, 104 poles, and 201 podiums. It is an extraordinary feat of human performance. And that's why I was asked this week, actually, at a Porsche event I was doing. And I was talking about, one of the questions was, do you think Lewis has an 8th championship in him? And you go, when he goes to Ferrari, with all that resurgence, with all that motivation, a new fresh field for him to plow, so to speak, I think you could see it. Let's see if that's that dissection of Ferrari's, the capability of the car moving into 2025. So anyway, hats off to Sir Lewis. And he's actually going to be here at the Wynn. I think he is sort of the host hotel for a lot of these guys for the Las Vegas Grand Prix. And he's got a pop-up of his 44th clothing. He's got his new tequila, his non-alcoholic tequila. They're doing a pop-up here. So Lewis Hamilton and the Wynn, certainly a good place, a good mix. Let's hope we can try and get him in here on the way through. I'm fingers crossed. Listen, I don't know if that's going to happen. Well, swearing in motorsport. I've thought a lot about this one as a Brit, because our favorite other words are swear words. And as a Brit, we totally embrace the vulgarity, but the effectiveness of the occasional swear word. Apologies to our fair neighbors, but we're pretty good at it. Remember, all these drivers learn English in the cauldron of British motorsports. That's why they all have a slightly provincial English accent when they talk it quite a lot. And believe me, they know a lot of swear words from their mechanics. But that's not really the point. The point is that under the pressure that they're in a Formula One car, risking their lives, pushing it up against the edge. When you see someone cut you off, we just hear them go, oh, that was close. But I tell you what, in the car, your pulse rate spikes. It's very aggressive to you, and you are operating at the top of your game. So when a swear word comes out, I think there's another reason that it becomes more noticeable in Formula One, and that is when you're watching soccer, when you're watching American football, if you're watching the players, even in the World Cup final, you can see the captain. I mean, they're all swearing at each other. You don't have to be a lip reader to understand what they're saying. But because there's no audio, it just sort of goes unmentioned across global media. But you can't see the drivers talking. All you can do is hear them. So, I mean, to be judged for that, to be penalized in the way Max Verstappen is being penalized, and the absurdity of it from people that basically are sitting in the comfort of an air-conditioned suite, eating shrimp cocktails while the drivers are out there. I mean, it's a gross misunderstanding of the demands of the sport. And in the interest of entertainment, we're now opening up their channels so you and I can hear everything they say. But it doesn't mean that we should be able to hear everything they say. So I'm sure they get around it. Max Verstappen is, in that privileged position of being the dominant, the GOAT in Formula One in so many ways. And what he's making his protest felt. And it was a bit absurd to see him do monosyllabic answers in a press conference and then go downstairs into the paddock and freely talk. So I'm sure that's not the end of the story, but the drivers union are all behind him. It's not really a union, but the drivers club is all behind him in his sort of defense. So, but it is a bit ridiculous in today's age, isn't it? Go out, risk your life. You could die live on TV, but don't say the F word. You don't need to go 200 miles an hour to outrun your inbox or pull multiple Gs around corners just to decline a phone call. You don't even need to have someone waving a yellow flag to tell you to slow down and look around. Basically, you don't need to be a professional driver to disconnect and break free. All you have to do, guys, is drive. Mobil 1 for the love of driving. On this, visit loveofdriving.us/drive to win to learn more. He is literally the main guy on F1 TV Live. He has grown up through the junior formula. He knows all these drivers when they were back before they made their way into the formula. Not all of them, obviously, the younger ones. He's seen them perform. He knows a lot about their background. And I just think he's becoming, an elite broadcaster. And certainly that's why I choose to watch Formula One on the app. So I'm going to bring Alex in now. Alex, so nice to have you on the show again. I hope you enjoyed yourself in Singapore.
Yeah, another great Grand Prix. It's always such an exciting one to enjoy. And we got plenty to talk about. We didn't have the most thrilling race of the year. Sometimes you get a great one. Sometimes you don't get a great one. But we have a lot to talk about after that weekend.
Yeah, we do. Do you know what I just compared it to? It was like going to a concert when all the musicians, all the band members and the singer, they all do an amazing job. Great individual performances, but the gig wasn't that fun to watch. I mean, that's really what we went through, wasn't it? You no shortage of great storylines, great performances, but, it's not going to go down in history.
No, it's when we look at this year and we pick through the amazing moments that we've seen, and we've seen so many incredible landmark races. Yeah, this one's going to be one that's part of the overall narrative and the overall picture. But yeah, exactly as you put it.
So tell me about Singapore and just what it's like going there, just as a cultural thing, before we dive into the race. I went there when I was racing in the Asian Pacific Touring Car Championship, and I went there and I went to raffles and did all the things that you do. What's it like going there? Just as an automotive tourist, just to sort of describe the scene and the background and what it's like driving into the track or walking or however you do it.
Yeah, it's a lovely wander in to the circuit. I think the nice thing about it is that you can wander into the circuit if if the hotel's close enough. The downside is that you get a tiny bit sweaty on the way in because the humidity, as you well know, is so intense. And I think the one thing that maybe doesn't always come across, because the TV team do such a good job of making it seem like this vast, almost cinematic setting, is that it's actually quite claustrophobic at certain points, and the track folds over itself a little bit. It's an amazing place to watch a Grand Prix if you ever get that opportunity. But no, the main talking point is always the heat, and it's an amazing backdrop for a race. But at ground level, yeah, quite claustrophobic with the way that the track folds round on itself.
When you go into the paddock, again, it's just sort of behind the scenes stuff for our fans. What is your access generally to the drivers, Alex, as you walk around? If you see Lewis coming by, or is it some of the younger guys that you've built relationships with over the years that are now in Formula One? How is your interaction with them on a off-air basis?
It completely varies. So with Formula One, it's way more structured than, say, other motor racing. We've had lots more guests in the paddock in recent times because the sport is going through such an incredible popularity boom. It does entirely depend on the driver. If I've known them a while, and every driver says hello, there isn't a bad apple in the bunch. Every driver says hello. Every driver is friendly. Some stop for a longer conversation, but they're all incredibly busy people. And I have to say, I mean, it sounds like a cheesy answer. If I was made to do that much work on top of my actual job, I would not be in the nice, fine spirits that they almost to a driver constantly are, because it's every channel, it's every broadcaster, it's them. They know everyone and everyone knows them. So yeah, the conversations are longer with some drivers than others, but all are a fairly friendly bunch.
Well, the conversation, of course, over the weekend, certainly by the end of the weekend, it was a Lando show, wasn't it? We have to, as Brits, we have to jump in there and go, he was extraordinary this weekend from the first lap. When I was watching it, you just see the attitude of his car, and it must have been a bit more impressive in person. I mean, you could tell he was on it when others weren't on it, and he never let off the gas, including clipping the wall twice, until the checkered flag.
It was a really intriguing point on Lando's narrative for the year, for me, because he's having to learn at almost warp speed. Most drivers get a breakthrough win, get a couple of years at the front, they get their podiums, they get a couple of pole positions, and then they get a championship challenge. Lando had no wins coming into this year. He had one pole position coming into this season, and he's gone from that breakthrough victory, a bit of a wobble, couple of some difficult moments over the summer, some flashpoints with his teammate. And then he finds himself with the expectation of, yeah, this driver can win Grand Prix by 20 seconds. But along that way, you're still seeing moments of that learning process. Like we saw, entry to turn 10, just clips the wall. And then the moment that really could have defined the next few years of his career, if he'd been a bit deeper into the wall at turn 14, that would have been an extremely difficult moment to explain. And instead, it was a brush of the wall. He moved on. And we're talking about a 20-second crushing victory in a season where we've had 3 cars over the line separated by a second at points. So it was standout stuff, but it contained ingredients of how quickly he's having to learn to dance with the very, very best in Formula One. And on Sunday, with the right equipment, that was him.
Great sort of sum up of that whole situation there from you. And something that I thought about as well was he does have this annoyingly, blindingly fast, cool, calculated assassin of a teammate who has qualities that I'm sure Lando, and we talked about it with DC last week, you always look for qualities in your teammate and you respect them and begrudgingly acknowledge that sometimes your teammate can do things you can't. And Oscar has some of those qualities, I think, up against Lando. I wonder how much of it was also Lando in that very short break between the two races going, I've just got to lay it down. I've just got to be on it. I can't let my weaknesses expose themselves. I've just got to be the best I can be. Because Oscar didn't even get a look in. I know he finished third, but relatively, it was a bit of a, all right, young pup, you've been snapping at my heels, but let me just remind you who's boss here. There was a little bit of that, in my opinion.
There's an ebb and flow to it. The thing about Oscar Piastri being so good so soon is that our expectations of him are already sky high, which is incredible. He started 40 Grand Prix. They're constantly asking him what he thinks about the strategy, which even though he's got, not even 2 full years of experience. And then, of course, you're going to have the ebb and flow of like a Grand Prix like Spain, where he wasn't perhaps in Lando's league. And like we saw again, just a step back. But you do have to remind yourself, not even 2 full seasons in, he's got to tick off the pole position, but he's got 2 Grand Prix wins. He's got a sprint win. That performance in Baku was superlative, but he's just not as far down the path as Lando is. I think when you see Oscar in, say, his 4th season, that's when I think the other drivers will be more wary because he's only getting more complete with every batch of races that he runs.
Yeah, he really, it's a good reminder of that, isn't it? But the radio transmissions are interesting. It's almost like he's there. He's on the streets of Singapore. It applies to any of them. They're sweating. They're just literally digging to the bottom of their reserves. The water bottle's got no more water in it. And their crew chief, or their engineer saying, what do you think we should do on strategy? I'm waiting for one of them to say, there's 999 of you back at the factory, 27 engineers. Can you come up with a plan? You know what I mean? It's like, I'm a little busy here. It's wild, the fact they're asking them so much feedback.
I completely agree. I think they've got quite literally enough on their plate, especially somewhere as Singapore where the bumps are intense. And as you say, the heat, the stamina, the fact that you will be in close proximity to one of the, anyone that you're racing in Formula One, you're in close proximity to one of the best drivers in the world. And then, to be asked, we always emphasize as well, don't we? A driver like Fernando Alonso, a driver like Carlos Sainz, for their extra capacity to do that. So the fact that they're asking Oscar so soon shows how highly they rate him. But that I think asks a lot of the McLaren drivers at certain points.
Yeah, you're right. Something that comes with experience is just that little extra bandwidth, right? The little ability of Fernando or Lewis or Carlos. Carlos relatively is young compared to those first 2, but the ability to just be able to process that information, because experience gives you time, I believe, and time is what makes great athletes. Go back to Max. He, even though it seemed like he was surprised by the pace of the McLaren, he was resigned to it. But actually, if you watch what he did, and I said it right off the top, he had an amazing race and the pace and strategy to pull off second place. Is your opinion that maybe, if it wasn't Max, it probably wouldn't have been a second place for anyone else?
I completely agree. Yeah, that's one of those situations whereby his ability to build a weekend, and let's be honest, remain quite calm in the middle of his longest winless streak since 2020. And there have been flashpoints, but he knows that the McLaren, back-to-back wins for the first time since 2012, he knows which way this is trending. And so his task, having been utterly dominant last year, is to suddenly accept second and almost celebrate second, because as we saw with Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz, that was a Grand Prix weekend where it was very, very easy to have the pace of a second-place car and turn it into a lower position. And he just cannot afford to let that happen. So, yeah. As second places go, Max, I think, would be very, very pleased with that. And yeah, he just cannot afford to turn a second into a 6th at any of the races. Basically, can't have a repeat at Monza, where McLaren slightly let him off the hook. And yes, I concur with you. Very, very impressive second place.
You said, it's funny you mentioned flashpoints, because during the season, when it became obvious that it wasn't just a flash in the pan, that McLaren were going to be fast and Ferrari could be faster than them at times. You're right. Can you imagine, just as an athlete, and we forget these are still very young men, at the height of their career. But when you go back to the motorhome, when you go back to your hotel that night, you've got to reflect and go, how am I going to handle this? How am I going to behave? And you saw him reacting like you would almost as like with naivety and youth and like fight back and be a little fiery, but he's regrouped, hasn't he? He is now, as you say, very mature in his handling of it, because I think he just knows, given the equipment, I can win. If I don't, I'm going to get the best result. But that maturity has had to kick in.
Yeah, almost in an evolved process, again, far quicker. It's a very unusual situation that we're looking at a driver who probably needs one Grand Prix victory to arrest that McLaren momentum and almost land the knockout blow, but just hasn't had a look in. And I wonder if Red Bull regret taking that engine penalty in Belgium, because there's a good opportunity there to get that win in, to get the points swing up again. And they elected to take the engine penalty based on their dominant performances in previous years there. It's a different skill set that he's had to learn, and I think it'll be part of a amazing career retrospective when he eventually gets to the end of his career.
Yeah, exactly. And you're right, aren't you? I hadn't really thought about Red Bull as a team having to recalibrate their ebb and flow of the situations in races. I've only just been thinking really about McLaren, who haven't been championship contenders for a long time. They haven't been consistently at the front, and it's taken then some recalibration within the team to know we can't make pit stop mistakes. We can't make strategy mistakes. And Red Bull in the past did not make any mistakes, as much as I can remember last year, from whether it was the guy cleaning the wheels on the truck when they arrived through to the guys, doing the tire changes. They were immaculate. And whether it's on the way up or whether on the way down, Alex, you've got to perform relative to your circumstances. And do you feel that in the paddock? Can you feel the Red Bull team and the McLaren team sort of one in offense and one in defense?
Not necessarily. I think everyone's going about their business pretty much business as usual, but I think there is a difference. I mean, it's the equivalent in soccer of saying, right, we're going to play for a draw rather than go all out for the win. It's the equivalent of being able to settle for kicking a field goal rather than attempting a long risky touchdown on third down. It's a different way of going racing, and maybe in Austin we'll get a situation where Red Bull can find themselves with a car that can compete again, and they slip back into the gear that they've been in for the last couple of years. They are on the defensive, but I think that's not evident. It's not like their faces are wrapped with worry. But it is evident that with the way that they've approached things, back in Austria, the slow pit stop for Max, and as you say, a few weaknesses creeping in after a couple of seasons of nearly immaculate team operations. Yeah.
So we're watching Ferrari. You watch the way the Ferraris go around Charles Leclerc. He's so fast. The car's right there. With maybe a different qualifying, they could have run at the front. Certainly, you said that during the race. Given a better qualifying, they can, Charles can run at the pace of Lando at the front, or could he, or close enough, certainly faster than Max. When you're watching that unfold as a commentator, you're having to be analyzing, reviewing, and being careful of what you say out on air. I know how that goes. I've done it enough. But what's your internal monologue when it comes to Ferrari?
Couple of points on that. Number one, disappointed that we didn't have another contender in the mix. This would be a really intriguing one if we had McLaren, Ferrari, and Red Bull in the mix. We had, three teams in the battle for victory last year. And then the other aspect is, I think they'll be quite disappointed to come away from two races where they've had great pace at both and they've managed to win neither Grand Prix, which I think slightly against expectations, given that they went into Baku so buoyant after that victory in Italy. I think they know that they've let a few points get away there. Looking ahead to next year with Lewis joining the team, that is going to have to be tightened up. And I guess they will review and tighten up the processes because, many points went out the door in the last week for Ferrari, and they know that more than anyone else. So just the disappointment they weren't also involved in the battle at the front.
Yeah, it was. You can see the frustration that also comes through from a driver when you've got the fast car, but you've got as fast a car, and you can't do anything about it. Certainly on those streets, It was crazy. I just want to go back to Oscar's overtaking just for a second before we talk about Mercedes. I talked about it with DC. There is something extraordinary about someone that is a great overtaker. And we see it so much, and I felt it from personal experience. You catch the guy up in front, you overtake a whole group of cars, and then you just kind of stall. Oscar's got that aggressive confidence that he just executes a pass without hesitation, which sort of takes a lot of them by surprise. And when you're in the booth and you're sitting there with, my brain's just gone, your co-hosts, you're talking about it and you're watching those overtakes be executed. I mean, it's a tongue in your mouth sort of, holding your breath moment, especially on these street circuits. How difficult is it? Give us perspective on when he pulls off those overtakes.
Well, the one from Baku, I thought he was going to go sailing on by.
Yeah,
I was basically in the gear of good effort kind of thing, and then into the braking zone. Hold on, he's gonna have a chance with that, and it was still clear he was going quite deep into the tire wall, and you're like, he's never going to pull this off, is he? And the fact, and then he does. You're almost reacting with the sort of shock that everyone else would in the living room. That's the wonderful thing about holding the microphone, that you can watch all the Grand Prix since 1998, like I did since I was a kid, and you still get surprised with a move from way back. As did Charles Leclerc, because he didn't defend it. So it's thrilling. It's why we watch it. So it's one of the elements that we love motor racing for, and we love it in the commentary box. When that's going on. So the Baku move for the lead was exceptional. He did have a tyre advantage on the two Mercedes, but I think the drivers instantly respect him. I think the drivers have instantly gone, he's a fair driver. If you remember at the start of the year, he was very, very hesitant to try a risky move. He was stuck behind a car in Jeddah, lap after lap after lap after lap, and he just wouldn't go for a risky move. He plays the percentages. He's not a gambler with it. He's not prepared to stick other drivers in the hedge. And because he's not prepared to stick other drivers in the hedge, I think he's then given room because he plays the percentages, and it's usually, I can't remember him having a lot of contact in his junior racing career off the top of my head. So I think he's brave with it, but because of the way he races everyone, I think he gets the same respect back, which of course in turn allows him to launch a dive bomb move when he's been given the room and been fair when battling with Charles earlier in the year, say Belgium, brilliant move there. And then maybe there's a percentage chance that he's bought himself with the clean racing, which allows him to pull off moves like Baku.
Who does he remind you of? Back from the greats.
Whoa. That's a great question. His personality is unlike anything I've really encountered because it's completely authentic. He's not doing an Iceman thing. He's not trying to get out of interviews. He just uses 6 words if 6 words will do. He is fiercely intense behind that, like fairly chilled answer. But there's a great thing with the personality where you don't get too high or you don't get too low. That's just who he is. He reminds me with his, I think his racecraft is up there with Lewis's ability to overtake, and he's going that way. But of the drivers I've seen, so I started junior commentary in 2015, he's probably the most complete at this age that I've seen. And I don't know if there's a like-for-like comparison there. Charles always had the speed. George always had a very high ceiling overall and wonderful confidence to dictate to a team what he needed from a car. They're a wonderful communicator to get a car set up to his skill set. They're the standouts as well. When I was commentating Lando on Formula 2, you couldn't get the tyres to switch on, so that was very much almost damage limitation all year. But no, Oscar's, it won a Formula 3 championship that was held in just over 70 days, then goes to a Formula 2 championship that was spread out across a huge amount of months. So different circumstances, different machinery, wet, dry. He's got everything. And yeah, it seems incredible that anyone ever left him on the sidelines, and he's going to be around for a really long time. The question then becomes, can you take that leap that we've been watching Lando all year, try to take that leap from good to great, and that'll be the next task for him, and I think it will be spectacular to watch in the next couple of seasons.
I do too, especially combined with the fact that the way the regulations are, the way everyone's getting very close right now before 2026.
Yeah.
I think there's going to be a lot of people, arguably, who are going to try and stop Oscar reaching that pivotal moment. So, I mean, for us, it's just bloody great racing, isn't it? How can we argue with it on every level? Funny you should mention George, because I just literally remembered. I meant to write it down. That was such an interesting radio comms, right? And you chuckled when you heard it. Can't remember what you said when he was like, give me some enthusiasm, give me some encouragement here. I don't think I've ever heard a driver say that. It is exactly the kind of rubbish I would have said, by the way, because when you're out there in a long stint in the middle of the night at Le Mans, as you know, Alex, you're like, I just need someone remind me that there's humanity out there, that I'm not alone. George, what? Yeah, just weird to hear it, but I get it. I don't think he deserves any knocks for it. But what were your thoughts when you heard that?
It's unusual, but not hugely. It always makes you smile when we hear George on the radio, because there are two things going on. He has such a British turn of phrase that it always puts a smile on your face. Coming out with a blimey or holy moly or something like that. It's always quite fun. But to go back to the point before, that's how he has succeeded. That's how he's got into a Mercedes. You need more than talent. And his great skill climbing the ranks was being able to dictate, right, I'm feeling exhausted. It's the middle of the Grand Prix. I'm not fully aware of the context. I need some encouragement. I need some information. He's prepared to say it. He's always been prepared to say it. So we get a smile out of it. He gets what he needs. And he didn't melt under the pressure of the Ferrari chasing him down. Resolute final stint, and he gets more points for his team than he might have done. So his ability to demand what he needs at the right moment has been the making it.
Yeah, it's fun to watch. Lewis, of course, he's always tough on himself, isn't he? He really is. And sometimes you wonder if some of his radio transmissions are a little nuanced or, little misleading, just for anyone else that's listening. He did seem bullish about the race ahead. He started on those soft tires, only one of the top 10 to do that. A little bit of a surprise, I think, when the tire covers came off. Do you just think, and you said it was, or Jolyon did, it's such a short sprint to that first corner. You'd have to have a electrifying start in that short gap, even on softs, to beat anyone to the first corner. But how is he right now? How do you analyze his race there in Singapore?
It feels indicative that he's ready for the change. Remember at the start of the year when we had this massive shock? It was a rumor, then it was confirmed by the end of the day, one of the greatest and most surprising driver moves in history, that he's going to Ferrari. I think he wants to get there now. He's achieved wonderful things with Mercedes, won so many titles, so many Grand Prix, he's broken records with them. But the thing that made him leave the team, I think, is the same thing gnawing away at him. And he's a pure racer. And when you see that everyone else is on the medium tire and you have been given the soft, so it's 90 meters down to the first turn, and you know how the Singapore Grand Prix goes without a safety car. If you get to the middle part of the race, the percentage of the safety car goes down. They've removed the corners under the grandstand, which used to be the greatest generator of safety cars. You know that you've been basically strapped in the car for a long 2 hours. And he didn't agree with it. He's mentioned before, he's been very articulate before about asking for things and not always getting them. I think that is far more likely to happen at Ferrari under Fred than it has been even when he's got the greatest statistical CV in the history of Formula One. And I think he's ready to get to Maranello.
That's an interesting viewpoint. I think so too. Everyone wants to put on the red suit. As my dad said to me, he said, Porsche is where he won all his races, but that year and a half with Ferrari, that's what he will remember to his deathbed. So very exciting. Talking about new kids, the opposite, new kids on the block. What was your sort of look on each other's faces in the booth or in your broadcast team when you heard that Franco Colapinto had got that Williams ride very briefly, till the end of the year? Because I don't follow the junior formula like you do. I didn't see these guys come up. It's a bit disconnected for us over here in the States. And I was like, Franco, who? But he is certainly proving a lot of elements. I actually did a podcast with someone else yesterday, and I said, it just proves to me the level of preparation that these young guys have, that yes, they might not be championship winners or winning every race in the junior formula, but they're so well prepared. Their physicality, their sim prep, their technology awareness, their driving skills, their karting background. And here he comes in and he's suddenly in the line for other rides for next year. What was the look in the booth, and how is the reaction to it now?
Eyebrows raised when he was given the opportunity. You're taking a driver who hadn't even completed a full season Formula 2. Great overtake to win his one race of the year, but it was a reverse grid sprint. It wasn't a lineup where you qualify race, which is what we call the feature in Formula 2. So he was having a good rookie season. If you were going to say, right, your team manager of Williams, you're going to pick up a driver to replace Logan Sargent, he would have been in the conversation, but I wouldn't have expected, and I think everyone has been not amazed, because that's overselling it. Because the one thing that you heard from everyone who he worked with, Formula 3 level, even before Formula 3 level, people who have encountered him talk about the raw speed. That's not always the case. There are other attributes of drivers. They might go to a driver's adaptability. They might say, when the car is set up, they're a genius. They might talk about so many different aspects of their skill set. Every single time Colapinto was mentioned, his raw pace was talked about. So he does 2 seasons in Formula 3, looks good, wins races. Comes into Formula 2, again, looks good, wins races. But there were weekends where he disappeared and you didn't always see him. And you go, okay, Formula 1, that is so difficult to build your weekend. You have to take the car through every single time. Every single session, you have to be better. You have to build up to Q3. If you're Franco, you build up to Q3 in Baku, which is an amazing performance straight out of the box. He's just been able to harness his speed. I mean, you'll have seen it. There are some drivers who just, the more power and grip you give them, the better they get. And I just think that he's been able, in his first 3 races, take everything he knows and show us more of that raw speed, and just glimpses that he's able to have command of it in a way that good drivers can, like the first turn, where if you've been it there, you look like a complete rookie, and it's back down to earth after Baku. But he didn't bin it there. It was inspired stuff. And as you say, he's forced his way into conversation. So an eyebrow-raising move, brilliant speed, according to everyone that's ever seen him running anything from a go-kart to last week. And I'm delighted for him, because so much of motor racing can be luck and timing, and he's taken his opportunity, and you can't say better than that.
No, beautifully said. Yeah, I'm really, I like him on social media as well. I like seeing his interviews. He's got, and of course, the first Argentine driver since a legacy of some pretty decent ones legendary ones back in the day. I'm sure you can't really talk about it too much, but it's absurd, this whole swearing thing, right? With Max, and it's like such a diversion. It feels like American politics. They're making you look over there while they've got your hand in your pocket over here. It just seems, and I said it in my open, Alex, that I've been in the car. It's hot. It's demanding. You're sitting there, an incredible pressure cooker, and you're not sitting in an armchair. You're not sitting in air conditioning, and things come out your mouth rather like they do in soccer. I said, when you're watching World Cup, you see the English captain saying the F word, but you don't hear it. You just lip read. So a little bit of a distraction, but with some really pretty resonating consequences in the way Max is handling it, don't you think?
I thought, again, we talked about Max's maturity. If you go back to the presser where he said, if I get another question like that, I'm going to kick off. It's just so many words. I compare and contrast the way that he was able to, methodically make his point. Still, by the way, also told Tom Clarkson it was nothing to do with him, the interviewer that you always hear with the questions. Great guy, been at it for years. Make sure that Tom isn't in a horrible position by saying it's not you. And then goes and gives the press all the quotes anyway. I think shows the journey that he's been on. In the Premier League, for example, they can't mic up the referee like they might do in the NFL or rugby because you wouldn't be able to broadcast. You wouldn't be able to put it on before 9 o'clock. So, I mean, I heard in your open, you said, you're asking the drivers to risk their necks to do this. And so there's got to be some understanding there.
You sum everything up so well. Thank you for that. I agree. And I know you have to be careful with what you say, but that was pretty enlightening. Well, now it's time for the Mobil1 Pit Stop for the love of driving. Some quick little questions here, Alex. Was it a particular race car, driver, or race that inspired you to get involved in the world of motorsport?
I loved Mika Häkkinen growing up. I love the fact that he was so rapid over one lap, and occasionally he would bin it. I love the fast but fragile drivers. I always have. I remember Pierre Gasly in his GP2 winning campaign with either spin off or win by a really long way. That was amazing to broadcast. But that was the driver. Mika Häkkinen was the one who spiked the interest. He was champion when I first started watching, and I just love the fact that he could, start of the race, Belgium 2000, he spins, he has a silly little spin, he spends the rest of the race clawing back Michael Schumacher, then he pulls off one of the great overtakes of all time. How can you not love a driver capable of that?
As a kid, if you need a little bit of a drug to get you involved and hooked, that was it. Well, Murray Walker had James Hunt, and you have David Coulthard, DC. Different generations, but very similar spirits. Who do you think had to deal with a little bit more? Who had to do man management to a greater extent, you or Murray?
Definitely Murray. I mean, some of the stories you hear about James, stories I can tell you about him bringing bottles of wine to the commentary box, stories I can't tell you. But you probably know anyway, my friend. So, definitely Murray had harder work, but that was an amazing commentary pairing. What I love about it is you'll still see clips on the timeline appear where, Murray gives this wonderful descriptive build-up, and then James will dismiss it with all of his experience in a very witty one line, and what a great pairing. And that's the lovely thing about the age we're in. We can, I was 4 years old when James Hunt passed away, but I can still go back and enjoy all of his broadcasting work because of the archive that we've got and how readily available it is. One of the lovely things about it. When it comes to working with DC, he is an absolute pro. I don't know how many, routine contenders for the title, 13-time Grand Prix winner on the Formula One podium over 60 times. Would accept someone in their very early 30s being dropped in, and he could not have been more accommodating. So definitely Murray had more to put up with.
Lovely to hear. You mentioned the Mika Häkkinen overtake there. I think that'll probably be your answer. What particular moment in racing do you wish you had been in the booth for?
Oh man, definitely that. Think of, I would have shattered everyone's speakers at home. But I remember reacting to it as how old was I? I was 11 years old at the time, and I was jumping around the room then. So who knows how loud I'd have been?
Yeah, you'd have popped a valve now, I'll tell you that. Interesting, little silent. Which team does the best food in the paddock?
Oh, I am a big fan of what Mercedes put together. and McLaren are pretty good as well. Coffee is magnificent at Ferrari if you can get in.
I like that. Okay, the $1 million question: can Lewis Hamilton win an 8th championship at Ferrari?
Absolutely. Yeah, bring it on. It's going to be one of the stories of next year. He's probably going to have to wait until 2026, but yeah, he absolutely can.
Okay, love it. Well, that was the Mobil1 Pit Stop for the love of driving. Alex, I mean, just so good to have you on. Before we let you go, 3 weeks, it seems like a long break. Austin is coming up, a dedicated racetrack. Who has the most work to do you think, between now and then to raise their game?
Red Bull, utterly defining Grand Prix for Red Bull. They know that they can play damage limitation. They know that Max can take a car that might be in 6th and put it in 2nd, but they're giving themselves such a thin tightrope to walk. If we turn up to Austin and that car is unbalanced still in the way it was slightly earlier in the season, the alarm bells then start to ring. So I think it's a defining race for them. For what it's worth, I think it will be closer to the Red Bull that we've known in recent years in Austin. I think they've had a long time to target that race. And yeah, I expect there'll be a little bit more of a return to form. Whether it'll be enough to beat McLaren, I'm not so sure.
Which of the McLaren drivers do you think could have the head there?
I think Lando will be the driver to beat again in Austin, off the basis of his previous performances there and the fact that he knows he's got to put back-to-back wins together if he's going to be a contender come Abu Dhabi.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to remember Charles Leclerc with that outrageous qualifying one-lap speed he has on a dedicated racetrack. After 2 very confining tracks, we now have the beautiful sweeping acres of runoff that you have at COTA. When they get there, I mean, that is the kind of track that Leclerc could pull one of his special laps off, though, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, you can never discount him. That's the joy of the guy, that you can never discount him in Q3. What's interesting to me, though, is I'm not entirely certain whether Ferrari, because they brought that update where they were having bouncing in the high-speed corners, slightly longer corners, I just wonder whether they have lost a step in comparison to, Mercedes were very good at Silverstone. Ferrari were on the back foot there. Red Bull were struggling, and McLaren were the team to beat. And I suspect that whilst it might have closed up a little bit, it will still be the same rough picture of McLaren being the fastest and Ferrari might be slipping back on a circuit like that.
It was a bit funny, you should say, Silverstone, obviously, with Lewis, because it's not a dissimilar racetrack, right? Very fast straights, very fast high G-force cornering loads, change of direction. It'd be interesting to see if Lewis has got something in him there with the Mercedes, because if there was a template for a track that car runs well on, it is Austin.
Absolutely. It's so similar. They nick some of the corners directly off Silverstone.
Yeah.
That's the glorious first sector that we've got that's so defining there, which I think will favour McLaren around that circuit. They led a lot of laps last year when they were beginning this renaissance, and I think they'll be the team to beat. It's just a question of, can Red Bull deliver Max Verstappen that balance that he didn't have before we had these couple of street races?
Well, a few weeks off. I hope you enjoy yourself. And I know you have so many side projects, I'm sure, getting yourself ready to make your way stateside. Las Vegas is coming up, guys. It is not far away. Alex, do you look forward to the Las Vegas race? I mean, it's under the lights again, second year. I think we've got the setup with the proximity of the competition. If it is the same, the track temperatures, I think we could be in for a hell of a race when we come back to Vegas.
Well, last year it was one story and then we came to Vegas and it was something completely different. Given the competitive picture this year, I think it's going to be an exciting sequel, because last year was fairly good with that last corner pass to take second place with Charles Leclerc. So I expect more of the same. And I can't wait to get back there.
Ultimate Race Week at the Wynn Las Vegas is back, and just in time for you to make plans to attend the 2024 Heineken Las Vegas Grand Prix. The racing on the track last November was indeed electric, with a whopping 82 overtakes, and race fans that stay here at the Wynn Las Vegas are treated to a best-in-class Formula One hospitality experience like no other. There are multiple packages, all with different price points, available for purchase now at winlasvegas.com. The Grand Fan Package covers 3 nights of accommodations here at Wynn Las Vegas, along with 2 F1 grandstand tickets, access to exclusive special events and amenities. The Wynn Grid Club package allows you to watch the race from the second floor of the paddock, right above pit lane. This ultra-exclusive hospitality suite features up-close views of turns 1 and 2 from a private outdoor terrace, includes 5-star dining and beverage, and a 3-night stay in either a Wynn or Encore Tower suite. To make your ultimate race week reservations today, head to winlasvegas.com. That's winlasvegas.com. Don't miss out, as last year was incredible, and this year is promising to be even better. Thank you, mate. I really appreciate you coming on the show and taking the time after such a busy few weeks. I really appreciate it. Well, guys, before we have the Las Vegas Grand Prix, we have the Concours here at the Wynn. Go onto the website, check it all out. We have some incredible cars. I will be there hosting it, and I'm really looking forward to it, putting this event on the map very firmly in the automotive lifestyle calendar. Well, thank you very much, obviously, to Alex for joining us, to the Wynn Las Vegas for hosting us, and to Mobil1 for supporting the show. See you in a few weeks, guys. Bye.